This is Lance Mechanic. I'm here with Ron Perriello and Ray Felix. And tonight we have a special guest, Daniel Hort. Daniel, your background is you're into comic book curation.
Well, yeah, that's certainly the most exciting part of it all, I guess. I've been a comic collector for most of my life, and several years ago, I do a lot of work with large international art fairs, including Art Basel and Scope Art, Untitled Art. And so several years ago, it occurred to me that we should be taking comic artists to these major international destinations. And so we've actually been doing that for about 6 or 7 years now. And it's been, modestly successful. There's a lot of market for that that's done through auctions and there's a lot of private business, a lot of internet business, but there really aren't very many people doing it in that forum. There is a lot of referential and what's the right word for that? Where they're taking the art and they're repurposing it. What's the word they use? Appropriation, where they will take an artist and somebody will throw glitter on it or silk screen it 1,000 times. And at some interval, it occurred to me that was crazy. Why not have the original stuff?
And how did you get into printing?
Well, it was a family business. My great-grandfather founded the company that's sort of the legacy of what I do in 1915. And so we do a lot of events. I do a lot of event printing. I do the New York City Marathon. I do a lot of big art institutions, Jazz at Lincoln Center, Wave Hill, places like that. And as I say, over the course of time, we were doing a lot of art fairs, these large international art fairs that make the major international circuit. Art Basel, Miami, here in New York. I do an event in Barbados. And like I said, that there was just a lot of that kind of work. You would walk around these fairs and you would see Jack Kirby, you would see, John Romita, you would see them all over the place. And then you would speak to the gallerist and they didn't really know who it was. They didn't seem to care. It was Spider-Man. And they were doing it. And as I say, at some point it occurred to me that didn't seem right. Plus the fact that why not have the originals? So I have a lot of friends in that business, and one of them, who runs a very large fair, had suggested to me that he would give me some space and I should try to see what I could get done. And we went out and almost immediately had very good success. We brought some Frazettas down. We had Basil Gogo. We had Neil Adams was one of the people that I've worked with on that kind of stuff. And we've been able to bring this stuff down there. And as I say, you get a lot of selfies. A lot of people really like to see it. It's complicated because the price points are, in many circumstances, even higher than some of these, some of this art, that you're better off buying a silk screen than you are buying an original Romita. And you have to have people that know what it is. But it's a lot of fun to bring it down. I think that we definitely have a lot of people that are very interested and like to see it. So that gives us a good base to build from. And we've been able to move that forward. And as I say, I've sort of parlayed that into a business where we do a lot of work in the Caribbean. I've got a lot of, those types of international people coming through. We're actually working on a book right now for Winston Jordan, who was an extremely well-known cartoonist from Barbados. We're putting together an anthology of his. He had run a comic strip in The Nation for about 15, 20 years, and is in the Caribbean is incredibly well known, although here is, of course, an obscurity. And it's a lot of fun. So
that's how you basically got to work with Neil Adams on like an international level?
All of them. I've very, very few of the artists have not been interested. As soon as you say Art Basel, they're all interested to come. And so we've been very lucky in that respect, that they just, we've been very lucky. The dealers is a different story. It's a complicated discussion, which may not be that interesting. The dealers is different, but the artists themselves are incredibly interested. They love to do it. It's extremely exciting. And one of the things, particularly for Neil, is why not? He's as good as any of those guys. Better.
Yeah,
right.
Sure.
And I understand that you're planning an anti-capitalism magazine for this year.
Yes, right, exactly.
Yeah, this is a very good year for that.
Sure is. Sure is. Well, that was also fortuitous that I discovered that I could purchase the URL, anticapitalist.com. And
wow.
So I did. Yes, it's the most valuable URL I own, you know? So
I would say it's possibly now the most valuable URL, period.
Right. Well, hopefully. I hope so. So, and Ray and I had done the Comic-Con this year, which was a New York Comic-Con satellite. And I think was a lot of fun. And we expect to do that this year, you know, provided that everything is running. And that should be a good one, too. I'm excited about it. I think there's a real opportunity. I've been saying for years as a printer that the majors, Marvel and DC, are clearly going to abandon the shelves, that there's no doubt that that's what's coming here, is that they're going to continue to contract the lines. And eventually, I think they're going to discover that it really doesn't pay for them to be printing too many floppies. And somebody once said to me many years ago that, you know, the larger the consumer, the bigger the table scraps. And I think there's something to that, that as these companies begin to struggle and not want to do this stuff, they are going to, you know, leave a lot of room on the shelves. And insofar as there's going to be an industry of comic stores left, I think that there's going to be shelf space. So why not?
Here's a question. DC or Marvel?
Gee, you know, I'm the worst for these kinds of questions. I don't really have favorites. I love them both. Marvel, obviously, I have a sense we're all the same age, that if you grew up in, you know, late 60s, 70s, you know, that Marvel was the one in those years, for sure, that there was something terrific. I'm a New Yorker. They all lived in New York. Right, Captain America was always sort of my main guy. But, you know, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, I was always Teen Titans over X-Men. That was, for me, I always preferred Teen Titans over X-Men. But again, I love them both. I love them both.
Yeah,
what can I say?
Yeah, I mean, because to be honest, I mean, even though they were comic book versions, I mean, Superman and Batman basically were like New York characters too. In some regards, Gotham versus, you know, or
very true.
You know, basically New York was, I mean, with the movies, they seem to want to film them everywhere but New York for some reason. Like,
That's probably because of money.
Right? Exactly. I was like,
yeah, because the new Batman was being filmed in London and was supposed to move to Liverpool for more filming before it got shut down for a while because of Corona.
But I don't even understand it. The most recent Batman, Superman, I guess this Justice League, they went through this whole fakakta thing where essentially Metropolis and Gotham are on top of each other. That I don't know where that came from. It doesn't really make any sense. I mean, I like the idea of a mega city, the megalopolis. I love that. But that's a Judge Dredd thing. That's not really for
didn't they do something like that with with the grown-up version of Robin, where he's like basically in Gotham's version of Brooklyn?
Right. Yes.
Bloodhaven, yeah. He's like in Bloodhaven.
Oh, even better. Yeah. Like it's New Haven, except it's Bloodhaven.
Right, Bloodhaven, yeah. It's like
which, ironically, it's about to become for real.
Yeah,
tremendous storyline. The Bloodhaven storyline was a tremendous storyline. The Nightwing and the Outsiders that it really developed. I personally believe that Robin is the greatest comic book character of all time.
Oh, I think so.
You know,
you have a comic book store in the Caribbean. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I can. Well, it's a fledgling operation right now. We just brought down the first round of materials. The store itself is a game store called Anime Spot, and they do a lot of Magic and, you know, card games and that kind of thing. But there's a huge dearth of this stuff down there, and the audiences are pretty powerful. There's a lot of people that really enjoy this stuff. One of the things that's really interesting, and I just got back, we also do a fine art event there that features Caribbean artists, a lot of diasporic artists and things like that. So I was literally just there. I got back last week. And one of the things that I think is very funny, I may have told you, Stu, Ray, is so I was watching Picard, the new series. Pretty good, by the way. And I'm an old school guy. I'm not a next gen guy. I'm really Kirk, not Picard. But I really enjoyed it. So I was watching it, and I'm going around the island, and I'm saying, oh, I'm watching Picard. It's really great. Everybody has seen this show down there.
Really?
And really,
I didn't
well, to
get
see
it.
change. That if you know the Caribbean and you've been going for as long as I have, this is an internet thing. That there was a time when you would go to a place like Barbados or Jamaica that they were years behind in terms of the movies that they would see or the television that they would watch. It's just simply not the case anymore. I mean, forget about it. They're completely up to speed. They're playing the exact same video games. They're watching the exact same TV shows, and they are really rabid about all of this geek stuff. The Anime Con, which is the big Comic Con down in Barbados, happens in August, the end of August, and I expect for us to be down there again. We've been going for many, many years. Brought Mark Texas. So, I've been going down there for years. We just came out of our 10th year for CAFA, our Caribbean Art Fair. So I said, why not? So we brought down, I hate to say it, but I know a lot of comic stores that have gone under in the last couple of years. So overstock is available. And so we brought down a lot of graphic novels and some floppies and some figurines and things like that. And hopefully we're going to get it moving. Unfortunately, it looked like things were going really well. And now, of course, they're under quarantine also. So
how did you meet Ray, Felix?
Jeez, I don't know. How did we meet, Ray?
I think we met in a comic book store in,
yeah.
Magnum,
right? Shout out to Magnum,
Comics
right?
peddling my wares.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. Yeah, years ago. I'm a Bronx guy.
Yeah,
So.
It was a Wednesday, and I think you offered me a drink because that was the only comic book store I knew that actually served beer and hot cinnamon whiskey.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. That was an aged crowd, there's still, we still hang out. That was definitely an adult crowd. And it was a big deal. I mean, it was a lot of fun for everybody to be able to go and have it be. There's a store in Philadelphia, was it Amalgam, is it? That is now a coffee store. She's done so well with it because she sells coffee, she sells donuts, that the culture of hanging out is a big part of what the comic stores really bring. And I hope, as I say, with the one that we're doing in Barbados, because they do a lot of gaming, they play Magic, they play these cards, they have similarly a very regular crowd that's there for an extended period of time. That's, that it's more than just buying product. It's culture, it's community.
With that anti-capitalism magazine, now is that a, what kind of publication is that? Is that graphical or text-based or?
I think it's a bit of
it
both,
remains
right?
to be seen. It's a work in progress. Our ambition is similarly to a lot of the things that you'll find that certainly I'm interested in, is I'm interested in the void, that as there's more openings, I think there's opportunities to fill them. And so Mad Magazine, of course, went out just this last year. They were really the last of its kind. I'm sort of sad and disappointed. Not that I was buying it or reading it, but clearly it was a classic. National Lampoon. That's more our speed. We are with the Comic-Con and some of the other things. We are working with some far left organizations that have larger political agendas. And insofar as they can have a sense of humor about things and be interested, then we're happy to have them along. But by and large, Anti-Capitalist is going to be a spoof magazine, I think, for the time being. And we do expect it to be mostly graphics. If somebody wanted to write something that was interesting or sensible, we'll move into that. But to start with, Ray is working on the Trumpland, the Bronx Heroes in Trumpland, which seems to be doing quite well and has clearly opened up a niche. So we're going to try to fill it.
Yeah, they've, because, with Mad Magazine, I looked, I grew up with it, and they brought it, they seem to have been bringing it back a few years ago. And it was actually, I read it, I was surprised that some of the old timers were still working on it. And then I think they were still in New York until about a year or two before they went under. And then they moved them to California and got like a new crew there. And the quality went down immediately.
Mm-hmm.
They were using some old, backlog materials, some reprint stuff, and creating new content.
Right.
It's the economics are very difficult on all this stuff.
Yeah.
There's no mistaking that. The content is hard to do, and it's very expensive. The printing, I can tell you for a fact, is very costly. And once you move to an internet model, the competition is very, very stiff. And I do think, there's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's a real thing, is that once you move to the internet, unless you're really a powerful juggernaut, you're getting punched out by two guys with a microphone and an iPhone. You're really, all of a sudden, your humongous operation with enormous expense finds itself competing with two guys in their basement. And really, other than that, there's not that much difference. And so you can really get punched out pretty quickly. I mean, the Village Voice, of course, many, many years ago now contracted. First, they moved to a free paper, and they did that they hung in there for, 6 or 7 years on a free paper. Then they tried to move to an internet model. It's hard. It's really hard. And I don't know. I don't think anybody really knows what's going to happen with all of that.
Yeah, with the Village Voice, once they couldn't really monetize those classifieds anymore, that was it, because all the stuff they used to sell, like on the classified sections there, went to Craigslist and stuff.
100%. Well, it was like Desperately Seeking Susan. At the end of Desperately, right? That's not how they all met, was that they were writing in the classifieds of the Village Voice.
Yeah, and speaking of Desperately Seeking Susan, the one who played Rosanna Arquette's husband in that died of corona.
That's right.
Yesterday.
I'm so clever. I made the connection. I actually wasn't making it, but yes, indeed, that's true. That is true. He did. He passed away today.
Yeah.
Really? Rosanna Arquette.
Yeah,
That's
and then extra credit, he had a part in Crocodile Dundee too. I mean, in the first Crocodile Dundee.
That's right. He was the jilted boyfriend. Well, I'll bring it back to the original art part of this conversation. Is one of the things that you're starting to see is, of course, is a lot of these nice and very talented, successful young artists, they render everything digitally. And so they don't have that outlet for original art, which is a big part. If you speak to most artists of consequence, certainly the ones that we know when we were growing up, part of their economic equation was that somewhere in the middle of that, they were going to get back original art that could then be sold again. And so, I mean, Fiona Staples, who, God help us with Saga, if that stuff was done with pencil and paper, that original art would be worth something. She's digitally rendering everything. I forget the fella's name who's doing, what's it, East to West, is it? It'll come to me in a minute. He's digitally rendering everything. That so many of these young artists are now, you're doing it digitally, and it leaves them out of that original art market. They then try to back in by, sometimes they'll do something, they'll output something, they'll draw something and scan it. They try to trick the system, but it isn't the same. It's just not the same. The Society of Illustrators, unfortunately, also like everything else, has an exhibit up right now about comic strips, the original strips, and they've got Peanuts, and they've got a lot of Dick Tracy, a lot of really great stuff. And I'll tell you, you want to be interested in original art, go look at the comic strips. Those are so amazing. It's some of the greatest art you're ever going to see. The detail, and you can just see it, especially in the original form. You can really get a sense of the craftsmanship, of the incredible artistry of all these people. And it really adds, in my opinion, to the pleasure of all of that. And it's a huge disappointment to me. And I was I don't know when I realized that I guess I was already in the business a little bit. And I started to make the circuit and was like, okay, who are the hot young artists? And one by one, I would meet them. And one by one, they'd be like, yeah, no, I digitally render everything. I have a poster. They might remarket for you. They'll do sketches, and sketches is a huge market also. And I know a lot of people that love that stuff. And it's not something that I'm terribly interested in, but it's absolutely. I'm not discounting it. It's a great market. It's a fun thing. It's a great hobby if you're interested in sketching. I mean, it's limitless what you can do, and it really is fun. But it's not the same, of course, as pages from your most favorite books. I mean, I'm on so many Facebook chat groups that have people showing off their collections, and it blows your mind to see an original page from things that you read when you grew up. I mean, it's just so much fun.
You have any Neil Adams stories for us?
Oh, God. I don't even know where to begin. Let me just say that he's the greatest. I'm completely biased. Not only Neil is, I love him as a person. He's really just a fun, great individual. He's all that and more. You know, all that in a bag of chips is Neil Adams. And I really do believe that he is the greatest artist in comics ever. That we can debate on when you start to throw in the creation stuff and things like that. But pen to paper, I would put Neil Adams up there with anybody. And one story that I will tell you that's pretty funny about Neil is when I first was starting to work with him, I had asked him about, what he thought about other artists. So Michelangelo, for example, because again, that's really what we do. We do a lot of fine art stuff. I'm involved with all of that. So I asked him, I said, what do you think? And he goes, he's just one of the guys. Because he really viewed Michelangelo as a work-for-hire guy, very much the way he views himself. That he basically went through it. He's like, so what happened? Some guy from the church paid him. He painted the ceiling. Mm-hmm. And that's Neil Adams in a nutshell. There's certainly no shortage of self-belief. And he's just the greatest artist. The other thing about Neil, which is interesting, and I say this to everybody, especially people who want to be comic artists, Neil Adams never stops drawing. Ever. Never. You're sitting with Neil Adams. He's drawing the whole time. He actually is now doing these auctions online on his homepage on Facebook, and everybody should check it out. There are actually some really good deals there, and it's fun. He talks, and it's really just a pleasure to watch. But he's drawing the whole time. That you sit with him, he's drawing. People come in, they'll take a piece of paper out from under him, they'll stick another piece of paper, and he just keeps drawing. He never stops drawing. And it's really, really urgent for people who want to be comic artists. And Ray, you know this. We talk about this all the time. That you got to keep working. You got to crank. That's the difference between a comic artist and a pinup drawer or someone who does commissions. And I understand, and indeed it's really become a problem to some degree. Over the last several years, these commissions that people do at the Comic Cons, they really do pay pretty well. And so you see a lot of very established artists that are now, more interested in doing the commissions. They're easier and they pay better. But you've got to crank. If you want to do sequential, you got to crank. And again, in terms of sequential, it's one of the things, I must have 5 projects that have basically stalled because the artist can barely crank out a page a month. And it's just not good enough. Yeah, it just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And by the way, it doesn't matter how good the page looks. At some interval, sequential has to be done fast. And the other thing I will say about artists who are able to do that, and this is one of the great complications in today's society, is a lot of them really do have finishing people. They have other people around them. They have an inker that helps them do cleanups, that there's a lot of systems that go into it. And that's not true for everybody, but a lot of artists that really crank quietly have a staff. And that is what makes it very difficult for up-and-comings and people who haven't been quite as successful, or if the budget's not quite there, is you are under pressure to do the work of 3 people, where someone else may really have somebody there that can help them do some of the finishing, help them do some of the cleanups. We've all seen those pencils that are like, incoherent, and then the inker gets it, it's a masterpiece. So it's not easy, and I'm not trying to say that it is. But obviously, the reality of it is if you want to do a monthly book, by the way, you want to do a bi-monthly book, you got to crank. You can't be sitting on it that long. And like I said, I can't even begin to tell you. It's a horror story. One of the areas that I have not been as successful as I wish I had been is I have several comic book projects that have simply stalled because artists just don't move fast enough or at all. And you have to. You just have to. You know? I mean, forget about it. Especially you talk about people like a guy like Charles Schultz. Guy's doing it daily for years. His original art wasn't on the market. You really couldn't find it. It was quite well kept. And then I guess a couple of years ago, the variety of things happened in the ownership. They opened a museum. They got involved with some corporate partners. And now the market is flooded with original Peanuts strips. And they fetch humongous money. And they're worth it.
Yeah, Chip did that great book on the Peanuts, on Charlie Brown. That was a great book.
Everything Chip Kid does is great. He's the best. He really is terrific.
Yeah.
What's one of the best artists you've worked with in your time doing gallery shows and producing the shows? Who do you think is the top?
Frank Frazetta. The thing about Frazetta is Frank Frazetta is unimpeachably great. That you put him up with any master, oil paint, and forget about it. You get close to some of those paintings, there's no denying that you want to tell me you don't want to see the death dealer or some barbarian with some chicken pasties that's not highbrow enough for you. I'm not going to debate, but it is just unimpeachably fantastic. The man was an absolute master, a true genius, a real fabulous painter, amazing technician. And I'll tell you something else. We brought him down to the Scope Art Fair. It's got to be 6 or 7 years ago now. And we had 2 oil paintings of his, both really terrific. And we had a line out the door, people coming up to me. I had one guy, I swear to God, this year, I had one guy come up to me and he's like, I have goosebumps. He's like, look at my arm. I have goosebumps. And I looked at his arm. He did. He had goosebumps. He's like, I cannot believe I'm so close to this painting. That they were just fantastic. And it was really fun for us because that was actually one of our first forays. And because we had the Frazettas, nobody argued. That they might have thought it was sort of funny or kitschy or, well, here are the comic book guys. And we did develop ourselves into we're the comic book guys. We're the fun comic book guys. But the Frazettas really stuck our flag that we belong there, that we had artists that were just as good as anybody else. And nobody could argue. The minute you got anywhere near that thing, you didn't have to be very knowledgeable to see that this man was a genius.
Yeah, I mean, I think I saw like a document. There was like somebody did a TV show about his will, I believe.
Right, yes, there was. Yes, it was Strange Inheritances.
Right, yeah, exactly, on Fox Business, I think.
Right.
And even on that, you could just, like, when they would show like, they look like paintings.
They are like paintings. These oil paintings, they're unbelievable. His sketches are great too. His comic book work, his sequential, such as it was really terrific. But the oil paintings, and that was true for a lot of the pulp artists. I mean, obviously Steranko also truly great artist, truly masterful. That you get close to some of those originals. I mean, they're just fantastic. And Alex Ross, by the way, is another one. Alex Ross, who is a much newer artist, but Alex Ross is another one that when you get close to his masterpieces, to the bigger works that he's done, forget it. And what makes it really stand with other genres, if you will, of contemporary art is the fact that because the technique is so powerful, and particularly in the guys that we're talking about now, they mostly work in color. So when you see the pieces, they're complete. They're not, non-inked pencils or non-colored inks. That they're finished pieces. It becomes very easy, in my opinion, at any rate, to see just how good these artists are, and it makes my job a lot easier. Because then, as I say, when we stand there at our Basel with 100,000 people coming through, we are able to be part of that. That we're able to show that our artists belong there, And frankly, I've never had anybody say otherwise. Certainly not in terms of management or people that or industry people. That was one of the things that we found with the Frazettas was that the main people that came over, and we had people that came and stood there for 45 minutes and just stared at the goddamn thing, is that those people almost inevitably were gallerists. They were artists. They were dealers. These were people that really knew the industry, that they were involved in the craft. They weren't just fans and they weren't just taking selfies. A lot of times, you might as well, if you're just there to take a selfie, you could just as easily stand next to somebody's silk screen of a Ramita. But if you really know your business and you really understand the craft of drawing and painting and these types of things, there's no shortage of great artists. Of course, Frazetta, Alex Ross particularly, Neil Adams is another one that you stand there and you look at his work. You don't have to be a genius. I mean, I always tease him, and it's one of the things that makes him nuts. And a lot of people say, his best work was Ben Casey, the first stuff he ever did. But you look at those Ben Caseys, the man's a genius. There's no question about it. And by the way, look at the backgrounds. That's one of the things I love about comic strips. I have a Mary Worth that's not really that old and isn't particularly that valuable, but they're on a cruise ship. And the backgrounds are mind-blowing. They got a picture of the ship. There's the bar in the back. That I feel, and as you say, you can see that the best in comic strips, in my humble opinion. Obviously, comic books and original art like that does it. But for whatever reason, the comic strip, particularly a lot of the soap opera style ones, Mary Worth, what's her face, the on camera with
Brenda Starr.
Brenda Starr, absolutely. You look at the backgrounds on some of those things, oh man, they're just it's just mind-boggling. And again, I just don't think that anybody can look at that and argue. You could say it's not your cup of tea, but nobody's going to question the quality or the craftsmanship of these artists.
All right, makes sense. Did you guys, can you tell us a little bit about the Superman versus Batman and the planning of the donation of the Muhammad Ali Superman piece? Neil Adams says, what's the story with that, like the original?
Nothing to report on that one right now. So, nothing to report. It's still in the works. We actually are talking to some people. And it's obviously everything sort of stalled out. I think if that's to happen, and I hope that it will, is that will come in concert with, we now have some other, one of my other areas is we do a lot of Black art. I do a lot of Caribbean art, and I have some other artists who are incredibly well-known African-American artists that are also beginning to come into their own. And the one thing I will say about the Ali Superman stuff is, and I love Neil Adams, it's Ali that pushes the interest and value on that stuff. That clearly Muhammad Ali is the greatest of all time, and certainly in terms of places like the Smithsonian, they're interested in it for those reasons.
We're like, if people want to get in touch with you, or is there any website or contact information or?
Sure. Well, I've got a bunch of websites. My current site for, certainly if you want to buy printing, do your comic book, your posters, those types of things, it's dhpnyc.com. That's my consumer site. I also have onomatopoeia-art.com. That talks about all of our events. I hate to say it, but of course, we're a little bit on hold. My expectation in the upcoming months now is to do some of the Comic-Con circuit. Ray and I, provided that it's going to work out, are going to be doing some of that. We then, we'll be at New York Comic-Con. We expect to be satelliting with our Comic-Con once again, right up the block. So everybody should come out and see that. I'll be at Anime Con in Barbados at the end of August. I think that is. It's like August 27th or something like that. Did I just lose everybody? No, there I am. And then we'll be back at Art Basel. We're at the Breakwater Hotel in the first week of December for Art Basel, and anybody wants to come check us out then, we'll be happy to see you. We've got a lot of different kinds of things going on, but a lot of comic art, and then we'll be back around again. Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it anytime.
All right.
Awesome.
All right, take care.
Thanks very much.
Take care.
Bye.